Welcome back to Shakespeare in Delaware Park's Guest Artist Series. My name is Grace, and I'm thrilled to have Tracy Snyder joining us this morning, a dear SDP friend and somewhat of a Shakespeare wizard. Thanks for joining us, Tracy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited about today's topic as we'll be discussing how Shakespeare's text and storylines have influenced modern translations, some you may not even know of. Today we'll be discussing the Disney classic The Lion King, the Broadway hit West Side Story, and the 1999 favorite 10 Things I Hate About You. All right, so I'm going to pass the baton over to Tracy. Take it away.
Sure. So it's really interesting. One of the things that really draws me to Shakespeare is the emotion, the humanity, the relationships for characters. And what's great about new versions and adaptations and modern interpretations is that you can take those elements and apply it to a new time. I mean, looking at The Lion King, you're in the animal kingdom. And suddenly you're taking those elements of a father and son and an uncle, and it doesn't matter that you're talking about lions because it's that emotion and those relationships behind it. And so you can put that anywhere and tell a really incredible story because of Shakespeare's inspiration.
Can you, for those who aren't familiar with the parallel, can you just talk briefly about how The Lion King parallels Shakespeare's Hamlet?
Sure. So revisiting the film, I was actually kind of shocked now that I'm an adult at how serious The Lion King actually is. But some of the parallels, you're talking about this kingdom, and you have a ruler, you have the king and his son, who is obviously set to be the next ruler, and you have a very envious uncle that wants to take over. And so Scar, the uncle and the brother of Mufasa, the king, he plots with the hyenas, and actually it's very diabolical, but he plans to stampede and puts both Simba and Mufasa at risk. And he actually kills Mufasa and tries to kill Simba, but actually kind of scares him off. And so Simba leaves the kingdom for years and years, which is similar to Hamlet in ways. So the whole plot of Hamlet, if anyone doesn't know, is that the king has mysteriously died, and his wife has now married his brother. So Hamlet, his mother is now married to Claudius, which is very upsetting, and it has not been that long since the death of his father. So they're still in mourning, and yet they're celebrating a wedding. So some of the similarities are, the evil uncle trying to plot this murder and this death. And actually at one point in Hamlet, Claudius sends Hamlet away because he's going crazy. And so that's similar as well. And then there's, little similarities with Hamlet coming back to the kingdom, Simba eventually coming back to the animal kingdom, and having that face-off with Scar, and then to mirror that Hamlet's face-off with Claudius as well. Just a fun tidbit that I just learned is that in The Lion King, they originally had a different ending in their storyboard where Simba dies.
Oh my God.
Talk about really dark Disney and a bit depressing, but yeah, so Scar kills Simba, but then Scar dies in the fire. Yeah, Shakespeare would love it because it's everything that he wrote about, just in a different way. And
I'll have to watch that ending now. Let's move to West Side Story really quick, which reflects the Romeo and Juliet plotline.
Oh, who doesn't love West Side Story and Romeo and Juliet? A lot of people have problems with many Shakespeare shows because, when you're looking at it as a lens through 2020, there can be a lot of differences and opinions and all of that. But what I always used to say to students is look at the themes, look at the concepts behind Romeo and Juliet. You have family feuds, you have parent-children relationships, you have that first love, that infatuation, and then you add the tension and that dramatic structure, and you have this incredible, powerful story that I get roped into every time. And so the beauty of West Side Story is, you have that incredible choreography, you have the music, and so you add those elements to this story, and it's magnetic. So some of the parallels, you have that incredible balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet, and you have the balcony scene in West Side Story with Tonight. The Jets and the Sharks fighting, like the Capulets and the Montagues. They meet at the dance just like they do in the play. You have Bernardo as Tybalt and all, that dynamic between the sharks and Tony and that hatred. You have the nurse and Anita. And the great thing about West Side Story to me is it's just the character development, how you take these characters. You have the nurse, the friar, who is Doc in West Side Story, and you're placing them within this city, this toxic time with immigrants and the stereotypes and that competing for ground, literally ground. You're talking about jobs, you're talking about women and relationships, that family ousting that's happening as well. But that's that dream for something more that is so powerful. You have Romeo and Juliet who are right in the middle of all of this, and they know it and they see it, they're aware of it. They have that hope that their world can be so much better. And it's the same with Maria and Tony and this world of New York City, this world for a better America, a better life to move forward from. And so I think at the heart of it, that's what keeps drawing me back. It's not necessarily the actual love storyline, but it's that hope that love is going to pull you through to create a better day for tomorrow.
There are definitely parts of Shakespeare's scripts that are controversial, given they don't age well, but you can find those little plot points and like the themes and that do stand true, and they do just age beautifully. Let's talk about Taming of the Shrew and 10 Things I Hate About You and how that parallels, but also how it veers from the plot.
Talk about a killer cast. It's really amazing. And it is so bittersweet because of Heath Ledger and obviously losing him. But what's really fun is that this movie, it's so much more than just a teen flick. There's so many more dimensions to it. And it was really applauded by critics and audiences in '99. And I think that's what's helped hold the test of time for this film. And it's interesting looking at Kat and Katerina from Shrew. What's so interesting is that Shakespeare gives you this foundation. So everything that you need to know is in the text. You just have to know how to kind of hunt for it sometimes. But it is open for interpretation and how the actor comes into that role. But so many people have a problem with Taming of the Shrew because they look at Petruchio as trying to tame her, but in taming her, change her, right? Because for that time, such a strong-willed woman she's never going to get married. But in 10 Things I Hate About You, it's the same concept that she is like this shrew. They're scared of her. They don't want to get to know her. And even though Patrick, Heath Ledger's character, is hired to date her because there are other suitors that want to date her younger sister, Bianca, he ends up falling for her. And in doing so, pretty quickly, because he is intrigued by her more than he's scared of her. And so he really gets to know the real Kat, and he doesn't try to change her. He tries to understand her. And in doing so, she tries to understand him because they're both misunderstood creatures in this habitat of high school. And so I really look at 10 Things I Hate About You as just this beautiful story about these teens that, everything in their life seems pretty good, but they are misunderstood, and those emotions are still valid no matter where you're coming from. And so for these two romantic characters to really have that understanding, to get to know each other without trying to change them, I think is so powerful and so beautiful for a high school movie.
And I love what you said about how he doesn't try to change her, but understand her, because I think that's really important. And I think it's a really nice depiction of an alternative way of looking at that storyline. So just wrapping it up, these three modern translations, for lack of a better phrase, you have one that's geared at children. You have another one that's, a high school setting, a rom-com that, teens and young adults can relate to. And then you have this classic Broadway musical. How do these modern translations influence how we understand Shakespeare?
Well, for me, anytime that I have an experience with an adaptation, I'm always inspired by the original source to go back, because it always plays with my understanding of the playwright, the characters, the play itself, the structures, all those themes and relationships within it. And so I always want to go back to the original sources to rediscover those things, because every time you visit Shakespeare, he has something else to teach you and to tell you. So even if you have a new adaptation and it's not exactly verbatim that storyline, that's okay, because even within the story that they expose, you're gonna learn something about not only this new story, but also the original text and those relationships that you're looking at. When you're a young teenager and you're exposed to either Romeo and Juliet, West Side Story, or 10 Things I Hate About You, sometimes you do tend to see the surface of just pure romance. But again, as you get older, there's so many more elements to it, and it becomes heartbreaking and bittersweet and kismet. And, you know, suddenly your knowledge, your understanding, your experiences, all of these things go into Shakespeare, whether you're an actor, a playwright, a director, or a theater goer. And so all of these things, I think it's just a mutual give and take for the original to the adaptation. I don't think one is better than the other. But I think there's a respect between all of these worlds. And that's the joy with Shakespeare, is that there's a place for everything. These stories are timeless. They've been around before Shakespeare. They'll be around obviously much longer than Shakespeare and into the future. But we will always go back to Shakespeare for inspiration, for connection, and to understand a little bit more about ourselves.
Well, thank you, Tracy, so much for joining us this morning. And as always, thank you folks for listening in. Make sure to like and share with your friends, and we'll see you next week.